Welcome to Wildlife Conversations. I'm Jen Ritchie, your host, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. I know it's lunch hour and I know you have busy lives, but thanks so much for joining us. We're going to have a great discussion today. I also want to thank Robert's Camera for helping this podcast be up and running. And I know I told you this last time, but we have a point person at Roberts that will help just our Wildlife Conversations community. His name is Phil. And so you can contact him. I'll put all the notes about him and his email and in the description. And we also have a discount code just for our community. So I'll put that in the description below as well. But you can also visit robertscamera.com and they have everything available for your vision at the price you need. So check that out. But today I am so excited to welcome my guest. With a career spanning more than 2 decades, my guest today is a Canon Canada Ambassador and an associate fellow with the International League of Conservation Photographers and co-founder of the EXPOSED Wildlife Conservancy environmental charity. He is the author of several books like Tall Tales, Long Lenses, the Kootenay Wolves, the Canadian Rockies, Banff, Jasper, and Beyond, and the Pipestone Wolves. Plus, he's been published in countless magazines worldwide. His words and photography showcase the places he calls home and beyond. I'm honored to welcome Johnny Marriott today. Hi, John.
Hey, Jen. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. I'm so excited. I think I said this in my stories, but I literally looked back at when I started my Instagram account in like 2018, and you're one of the first people I followed. So it's like,
Oh, that's great.
It's so interesting. I've been watching your work for several years now, and you've just been an inspiration. So thank you for that. I know you're an inspiration to many people. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun community. So you actually, speaking of community, if you're here, say hi. You can say hi in the chat, say where you're listening from, say hi to John. And later you'll have the opportunity to ask questions live with us. So be thinking of your questions and we can put those in the question and answer box later. But I was just telling you that my husband and I have gotten to come to Banff and Jasper a couple times and just jaw-dropping beauty at every corner. So yeah. What a place to grow up. You grew up in BC, is that right?
I did. I grew up about 4 hours away from here, but also in mountainous, fairly wild terrain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And took yearly trips over to Banff with your family?
Yeah, starting as early as I can remember. I can remember like back 5, 6 years old doing camping trips to the Rockies. So
yeah. Oh, that is so
kind of
fun.
always grew up with the Rockies in my backyard.
Yeah, we tried to do that too, going out west with our kids once a year, just hoping we would create mountain kids.
Yeah.
So a couple of them have turned into that, which is thankful. 2 out of the 5, I think. So that's good. That's good. Some of them are a little sick of it from me wanting to always be in the mountains, but we have lots of people saying hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Lori. Hi, TJ. Hi, Blair. Monty's back. They say hi, John. Tish is here from Jackson Hole. That's great, Janine. So many people joining us. Thank you, guys. That's so fun. So in Tall Tales, Long Lenses, you dedicate that to your parents and you say, without them, this dream would have no beginning. So how did your parents and where you grew up really spark those dreams and influence your work in those beginning years?
Yeah, I mean, a few different ways. My first experiences in the wild, I remember my 5th birthday, my dad pulling me out of our trailer at a little campground along Shuswap Lake in interior British Columbia in the dark, putting me into the station wagon, driving up this logging road for, just seemed endless, driving up until it started getting light, and then hiking down at first light through this dew-covered trail down to this gurgling little creek that, at the time to a 5-year-old looked like this monstrous river, but it was really just a creek that was, maybe 5 yards across, and not deep at all, a foot deep, and then going in and catching 5 rainbow trout in my first ever fishing trip. And so that was, basically from that moment on, I was hooked on the wilderness and hooked on looking for bears and everything else. And my parents were kind of there all along in different ways, always encouraging being outdoors and stuff. But really, it came down when it came down to time to making a decision on becoming a professional photographer. They could have very easily said, oh, we're not going to support you in this, or we think you should pursue, something tied to your degree more, or or getting a real job.
Right,
And
right.
and they just never did. They always were there. They were, my dad loaned me money for the first big lens I bought,
Yeah,
and
I loved reading
tried
that.
to pay it back. It wasn't free
Give
money,
it to
but
everybody. Yeah, it's such a good
yeah,
book.
yeah,
It's such a good book.
yeah. So that book kind of details the whole. It's really from the start of when I was a little kid all the way
Hmm.
through to some of my most iconic wildlife experiences,
Yeah,
up until 2017, which is when the book came out. So
yeah. And
yeah.
your mom gave you her camera, right?
She
At one
did. Yeah, my
point.
mom, my first,
That's
my
that's
first,
pretty good.
when I was 6 years old, I got given a Kodak Instamatic, but my first sort of real camera was my mom's Pentax ME
Hmm.
Super, with a Vivitar lens that literally weighed as much as my whole camera bag now. It was just this huge, heavy metal thing that you could, even the Pentax
Yeah,
ME Super was, a metal box that you could literally drop and roll down a cliff and it would be fine.
yeah, yeah. What a gift. What a gift to you, like to
Yeah.
just give you that freedom, you know?
Yeah, it was incredible that the first time I came out to Banff, I came out for a weekend, and I had a job lined up in British Columbia as a forester.
Hmm.
That was, my degree was Bachelor of Science in Forestry, but it's
Hmm.
specializing in parks and wildlife management. And I had this job lined up as an assistant recreational forester. Came out to Banff for the weekend, and I phoned home and told my dad, I'm on my way back. And he said, actually, John, the funding fell through for your job. They phoned on Friday.
Oh
I
no.
put $500 in your bank account. You can pay me back later. Just stay in Banff and maybe you can get a job with parks. And that was the start of it all.
Oh
And
wow.
so, I
What,
started
that's a
working with
gift. I
parks.
can't, I'm trying to think if I would do that as a parent.
I know, like how amazing for my dad just to go down and put $500 in my bank account.
Yeah.
And took
Yeah.
me 3 years to pay him back, but
I know. I
it
think
was,
you're really honest in the book about the financial part of it. I really appreciated that because
yeah,
we talk about it a lot on the podcast, how you have to cobble a lot of things together to do this. Like many of us can't be full time because, it's not feasible. So you're cobbling all these little things together. Like I do portrait to make it work,
yeah,
but it's because we love it so much. Like you just can't imagine.
yeah.
You don't care how much it costs. So
No, yeah, you just, I mean, literally, I was sort of working and saving, and every extra $20 I had was going into gas or going into buying another roll of film, because of course this was back in
yeah,
the film days,
yeah.
in the early 1990s. And so, using my mom's Pentax ME Super initially, and then transitioning as quickly as I could to Canon gear, which
Hmm.
just happened to be the first camera I picked up in a camera shop. And went, oh, this looks
It's
nice.
fine.
And so so
And
that's,
look where that got
oh,
you.
why'd you choose Canon over Nikon or Sony or any of the others? I'm like, well, that's the first one I picked up. And then once you're sort of locked in, Canon has some great gear, and
Yep.
so that's what I've stuck with. Yeah,
Yep. I'm a Canon shooter too. Yeah. I
yeah, are
love
you?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you still feel your parents with you now in the way that you lead, in the way that you
I
approach
do.
things?
So and my parents have both passed away at this point, and that's why Tall Tales Long Lenses was dedicated to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Although I probably would have dedicated to them even if they were alive at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were both teachers. They were both math teachers,
Oh,
interestingly enough.
interesting.
So I have always had sort of, the ethos that they instilled in me has both applied to my wildlife photography, to my business sense,
Mm-hmm.
to just how I try to operate in the world
As a
in
human. Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
Trying to pass it along and pay it back. And if people email me with questions, I've always been of the mindset that I should respond to everybody. It might not be instant, but I try to
Mm-hmm.
get back to people with advice and things like that. And
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's
um,
big.
yeah, so
Yeah.
in teaching workshops, I definitely feel like my parents are a little bit there with me.
Yeah. That's
You know,
cool. That's really
taught me how
awesome.
to be a teacher, and
Yeah.
how to instill different values in people and things like that, and so
Yeah.
that I can put my ethics in wildlife photography into some of my I don't like to call them students, because they're more like
Yeah.
sort of colleagues or associates, or
Yeah.
people that come on trips with me. They end up becoming my friends.
Yeah, that's so true. I like that. I know those groups really do become like families when you go on workshops
Yeah,
and stuff. It's very
yeah,
nice. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Clients, or instead of students, like colleagues. I like that. That's nice.
yeah.
Well, I could see that throughout your whole book, and I will talk about it later, but the Kootenay Wolves, like your approach and like diligent pursuit of ethical photography was just stunning. I mean, it was just stunning throughout. I was like, it was just, I have so much to like live up to. I'm like, I need to change some things. So we can talk about that later. But how did your job at Parks Canada change everything whenever you were given a camera?
So the job at Parks Canada changed everything because of who I was working with and because of the opportunities I got right at the start. So I remember my boss coming in one day and saying, "Hey, have you ever used a camera before?" And me saying, "Yeah, I have. I've used my mom's." He's like, "Okay, great. I need someone to go out and shadow all these different jobs within Parks Canada and document it all for the slide library." And so for an entire summer, I got given a camera from Parks
Oh
Canada
man.
and just unlimited film. And I got to go out a week with park wardens and a week with the wildfire person and a week with the archaeologist and a week with it, just spent all this time getting to do all these cool things and photograph it all and grow my photo skills. And three of the people that I worked with in the department in Parks Canada were really avid amateur photographers. And so they were really good at, I remember first time I'd gone and shot this bighorn sheep ram, and it was the first big ram I'd ever photographed. And I had these all out on the light table. And I was like, "Oh, Jim, you got to come look at these awesome shots I just took." And he came in and he looked them over and, not bad. And he walked away. And so I ran out in the hallway and I pulled him out. "What do you mean not bad? Like, what's wrong with it?" And him going, "Well, there's this you could have changed and there's that." And just opened my eyes to suddenly, like, instead of taking it as being criticism, I took it as being constructive criticism and going, "Okay, here's where I need to improve." And I remember that, even now, I constantly am critiquing my own photos, and I love doing that for people that are on my trips, and just making the odd suggestion or making lots of suggestions if they're into that. And here's what you can do to improve here. Have you thought of this? Have you, what's that stick doing in there? Did you put that in there on purpose?
That's right. Yeah, it is so important. And I've had a mentor too. And like when I would show him things, he'd be like, "And what do you like about that photo?" And then it would be horrible, like sticks all over the deer's face. And like now when I look back, I'm like, "Oh, how kind." Because those were absolutely horrible. But if no one tells you, you don't know. So
no, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what I was
So
going
I
to say.
loved having, like, those mentors
Yeah.
were absolutely crucial to me early on. And then as I started my photography career, once I got into the business side, I also had a mentor that was outside of Parks Canada that was a professional ski photographer who kind of took me under his wing and showed me some of the ins and outs on the business side of things. And that was also crucial. So you really, that's, I think that's really key is being able to find people like that can help you out or that inspire you to, some people can do it on their own, but others need that little bit of help.
Yeah. Well, the business side is so hard. You don't really count that in whenever you're thinking, "Oh, I just want to start a little nature website." And then people start asking you for things. Well, then I had to start portrait, because when I put like a public nature thing, they wanted portraits. So I had to start like portrait and wildlife at the same time. And the business part was a whole other section of that. It's a lot. Definitely had to have help with that, because it was like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I price? How do I but it is that like cobbling things together and making it work. And I did notice throughout, like, mentorship has been really important to you, and you're really good at naming those mentors and people that help, the scientists, the researchers, all those people that came before you. And it's just showed the layers of your career. It was really good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. You've been to so
lots
many,
of thanks to them.
yeah. You've been to so many beautiful places. And so I'm going to show a few of your images, and you can tell people about them. But I was going to start with your links that you just recently won for, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I was watching, I think, that day when it was on, when you won, and I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." Yeah. This one's called Call of the Wild. Is that right?
This one's what did they ended up renaming it. I had originally called it Freeze a Crowd, and then British Natural History Museum renamed it. I can't even remember what they called it.
Okay. But I think it said Call of the Wild, but I'm not sure.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
hilarious.
they
The
renamed
names
it
are
from what I
hard.
had named it originally. So
Yeah, the names are hard.
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, this was in the Yukon.
Mm,
And this was part, I mean, I love the photo for what it shows, but I also love the photo for the memories that it brings me of. I was up there 2 weeks with a lynx researcher doing a story for a Canadian magazine, and we had a real hard time finding lynx. It was in a dip in the lynx cycle, and the researcher, had all these baited traps out and couldn't catch any lynx. And so after 8 days with her, I was also going out on my own after my sessions with her, trying to track lynx. And on the second to last day, I was there 2 weeks in total. And I started crossing these fresh lynx tracks on the second to last day. And I knew there had been 3 lynx in the area. And it was the only place, the whole section of the Yukon I was combing was the only place I'd found regular tracks. And so I got out the snowshoes and threw the pack on and started following. And within about half an hour, came upon the mother with her 2 kittens.
oh,
And
wow.
it's a fairly unique situation because it's a mother with actually 2 adult kittens. So they're over a
Oh,
year old,
okay.
which is not normal. It only happens in lynx down cycles
Okay.
when the food is very, very scarce, and the kittens won't disperse because they're afraid they're going to starve to death if they do. So
Mm,
they stay with mom and rely on her to keep
mm-hmm,
feeding them.
because it's usually
Um,
about a year and then they're
it's
out.
usually within a year
Okay.
they get tossed off after the first year,
Mm-hmm.
and the mom mates again. And
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
case, she didn't toss them off, and they were still with her. So it was quite a unique situation, but it does happen in these sort of down cycle years.
yeah.
And so this was about 4 hours into that tracking session. For the first bit of it, I was in quite dense forest, and they were catching snowshoe hares,
Mm,
and I was quite cognizant of making sure to not, interrupt any hunts. And so I had to kind of just be patient and wait my turn for something good to happen. And they came out by this old airstrip and laid down. And when I popped out on the airstrip, I could see them over to my left, kind of hunker down like this out of the wind. And so I circled around and got in front of them and then came in. And this has cropped quite a bit. And I told the competition committee
mm-hmm.
for Wildlife Photographer of the Year, I said, this was cropped, and it was on purpose because I didn't want to go. I knew if I got closer, I could get the exact same shot,
Right.
but I didn't want to disturb them from, when they're resting like this after feeding. It's really critical that you don't make them get up and walk away
Right. Conserve
because
their
it
energy,
interrupts the
right?
digestion process. And
Yeah.
they're also, when they're in one of these down years, that every single hair they get is really critical, and every bit of energy they use is really critical. So the competition committee was okay with that. I told them,
That's good.
this was cropped, and you have to send in the raw file and everything so they could see this was cropped in about 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 100 to 400 millimeter lens at the time,
Mm-hmm.
on Canon. I think it was before the R5. Yeah, it was before I had the R5. So it was the 5D4.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, it was just a pretty unique situation, and getting the 2 little, I got a whole series like this. I stayed there probably for about, I don't know, 8 to 10 minutes, and
Oh,
they would
man.
keep peeking out. And I have
That's
photos of all 3
awesome.
of them just sleeping with their heads down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
I
then I
think you have
just
some
slowly backed
yawns too,
away. And
maybe. Yeah.
what's that?
I think you maybe have one with a yawn too.
Yeah, I got yeah, there's a whole series of them. And
Yeah.
probably, in 8 to 10 minutes, I probably took, 600, 700 photos.
Wow.
I've narrowed it down. There's about 20 that I've kept from the
Yeah. Yeah.
encounter.
Yeah.
And then I amazingly found them the next day too. So my final 2 days of that trip, I was able to luck out with these lynx and
Mm-hmm.
have some
Mm-hmm.
pretty neat encounters with them.
And it's like one of those moments that you're just like in awe.
Oh, it's, yeah. I never get tired of watching big cats of
Yeah.
any type. I love the fact that the Canadian cats are not all that easy to find for the most part,
Mhm.
and same in the US.
Yeah.
It's not that easy to just walk out and find a lynx or a bobcat in most places.
Right.
Unless you're in the Bay Area by San Francisco looking for
Yeah.
bobcats. But most other areas it's pretty hard to find a a mountain lion or anything. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
it was a
never
pretty
seen one
unique
in all my
experience.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've been lucky enough now to I've seen 10 mountain lions, not including, I've been down in Patagonia and where you see like five
Mm-hmm,
or six a day.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But see, I had 10 mountain lion encounters. I've had a couple of 7 bobcat encounters, and then
Wow.
probably a couple hundred lynx encounters.
Wow.
Yeah,
See, those are the
yeah.
things. I was in Yellowstone this winter, and those are the things we're like, we're manifesting, like, we'll see a lynx. Let us see this. Let us see that. Knowing we're not going to see a lynx, We
Yeah,
did see a couple wolves, which was nice, but we did not see a lynx or a wolverine or all those special, out of
yeah,
reach things. But my dad one time was fishing in Southern Illinois, and of course, the Fish and Wildlife was saying there are no mountain lions in Southern Illinois, no mountain. But he was a
yeah.
fisherman, and he looked up on these bluffs, and there was one standing, and then the long tail walked away, and he's like, there are mountain lions for sure. So he got
Yeah,
that
they're starting to
one.
recolonize their territories out
Yes,
east.
absolutely. He got that one chance, and I don't know if anyone ever believed him, but I certainly did after the description. After the description, it was like, there's no way it was anything else. So it was
Yeah,
so cool. What beautiful animals. And then we were talking before we got on about the Kootenay. Like, that's
yeah.
my bucket list. I think I have images. If it's the wrong place, let me know. Because sometimes,
Okay.
as a Midwesterner, I get, is this the Kootenay here, or is
Yeah,
this,
this was the Kootenay just
okay,
in May.
Kootenay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had my trips to the Kootenay. I always am the first trips of the year in
Mm-hmm.
there, and it's partly because those are the trips that usually see wolves.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always see them, but yeah, this is a
Mm-hmm.
coastal sea wolf. So it's pretty fortunate to be able to get in there, and you see all these big grizzlies. It's sort of
Mm-hmm.
mating time. You get all these big males and females. You don't get very many cubs, so it's not a trip to come out and see cubs. But we had this wolf for a couple of hours.
Oh, wow.
So we're going along in a Zodiac, just kind of following it along the shore, and we would pop up ahead and then just wait for it at nice spots, and it would come walking along these rocky shorelines, and they're just exploring and foraging along the shore, looking for seals, seal pups, otters,
Mm-hmm.
things that carcasses that have washed up on shore.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. And I was thinking, John's been doing environmental images, environmental portraiture for a long time. It's like the thing now. And I'm like, well, John's been doing
Yeah,
it for a long time.
yeah, I've been doing it a lot. Yeah, I
You've got
started doing it
beautiful
way back,
environmental images. Yeah,
yeah, 25,
I
30
think I have
years
another
ago.
one that was
Yeah,
so I think it might be the same wolf.
yeah, that's the same wolf. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
love that. I love that
yeah,
image. I'm like, this has been environmental portraiture for a long time for John. I love how you show the environment, show that green and the rock. It's so
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
I think I might have one of your big grizzlies. This
Oh yeah,
might be Reacher, but I'm not sure.
yeah, that's Reacher. Yeah, yeah.
What a big
Yeah, so this was
dude.
yeah, so this was the biggest grizzly I've ever seen in my life, and this just happened in May. So we named him Reacher after the TV book movie
Hmm.
character Jack
Hmm.
Reacher, who's 6'5", 250 pounds, a gigantic human.
It's
And this
huge.
was so this bear, so the sedge that it's standing, so that's not actually grass, it's sedge, and
Hmm.
the sedge is 18 to 24 inches tall. So it gives you, so he's about 10 to 11 feet tall. So gigantic, he's
My
basically like
gosh.
Kodiak or Alaska sized bear in British Columbia, northern British Columbia. So he'd be getting close to 1,000 pound bear by fall,
Oh my
if he's not
gosh.
1,000 pounds. Like he's a big. This is in early May. He's already hibernated just for 4 or 5 months here, and look at how fat and muscular he still is.
Crazy. It's
Uh,
crazy.
yeah,
It looks
and he had
almost like
scars
fake.
all over the place,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah,
You've seen some big guys too in there. In your book, you talk about that, like Mr. P and Frank the Tank.
yeah,
So for him to outweigh all of them as well,
yeah.
like,
He's like Frank.
wow.
Frank the Tank was a, a sort of a brute with just covered in scars all over the place, but he was a
Yeah.
shorter bear. So he
Okay.
probably would have
Okay.
been a 9 foot tall bear.
Is he the
Still
cover?
still a very big bear,
Is he the
but
cover?
yeah, that's him on the cover
Yeah,
there.
because
Yeah.
he had a
So he
lot of
was
scars.
you could
Yeah.
see he was a surly, mean looking beast of a bear, but he was really awesome to photograph because he wasn't scared of humans, whereas Reacher was quite scared of humans.
Oh, interesting.
You see him, that photo you showed of him standing up. 2 seconds later, he was charging away like a buffalo.
Wow.
He just did not
Wow.
like it, and he stuck around for, I heard, right until just last week, but he never really got super comfortable with humans
Yeah.
at any point. He
Yeah. And then you
Yeah,
had
so
Mr.
that's
P, Mr. Personality, who was okay
yeah,
with humans, right?
totally ignored
Yeah.
humans. Mr.
Yeah.
P. Yeah, some of the big males in these areas, it's kind of like going up to Brooks Falls or any, you get some of these big males that just grow up around people and never get shot at. And
Right.
that's the key. They just don't
Yeah.
learn that people say, oh, there's a natural wariness always in bears and wolves, and that's not true. Wolves and bears that grow up in places where they're not shot at
Right.
don't, some of them still have a natural awareness, some of them do not. Some of them
Right.
really just treat humans as just being, another tree in the side of the shore or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
They really treat us with indifference. So
Well,
it's
especially if
quite
you're that
interesting to
big, who
see.
really cares?
Oh well, yeah, totally,
It's like,
yeah.
why is Reacher scared of you?
I know. Yeah, well, he's probably been around long enough to have been shot at in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah. It's sad. Yeah.
He it's the first time that we know of that we've seen him in the Kootenay, so he probably came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true. Mr. P is handsome. That's a handsome
yeah, Mr. Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw those pictures.
A lot of these bears are,
That's a handsome bear.
they're full of character, and Reacher has the reverse mohawk, which is quite the look.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I think I have the Great Bear Rainforest as well here.
Yeah, so this is so a white black bear, so a Kermode bear. Super rare. There's about 100 of them in the world. They're only found in one place in the Great Bear Rainforest, in the west coast of British Columbia. So this is a trip that I do every year. It's not a for sure thing. Last year we didn't see any. So it's, you always take a bit of a risk on these trips, but when you do get lucky, it's pretty incredible to see something that very few humans have set eyes on over the years.
Yeah. How do you handle that as a guide and workshop leader when it's iffy?
You set expectations when you go out. Nothing's a guarantee.
Yeah.
I've had it on a few trips over the years. Like I've been running trips since 2009. I had an Arctic trip where to see polar bears, narwhals, and belugas, and we saw zero of any of those. So you just never know. You can't.
I have heard that about
sometimes I have
to.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to take matters into my own hands. I've had a muskox trip once where we weren't seeing anything, and I just kind of took over from the guide and went out and found muskox.
Well, I think if people read your book, and I know when they follow your work, and I have for years, but after I read the books, I was so like, your tracking skills are unbelievable. I'm like, it's like second nature to you, but it's like bionic or something. I'm like, tell us a little bit about the Kootenay Wolves. I would love to hear you just the story of when the boss walks by and like just the little wolf pup that comes close to you and you say, hey there, buddy. But you just took so many steps to make sure that they were safe, to make sure they didn't see you, smell you, and like even to the effort of finding 4 different cars to drive. Like that just was like, I had never even thought of that, 4 different cars, but it's so true. When you're a photographer and you're going to the same places, people know your car.
Right.
So it's so true.
So just to fill people in a bit on the story. So the Kootenay Wolves I followed for 5 years straight, from 2012 to 2007, or 2013 to 2017/18. And I would follow them year round. So some years I spent as much as 250 days in the field.
Yes.
They were an hour and a half drive from my house. So I would drive, and then I would often sleep in my car down there, or I would come back, get a little sleep, and then go back out again, just day after day after day after day. It was before I had children, so my wife was very accommodating. But it was a wolf pack that I knew fairly early on. A couple of things. One, I knew that not a lot of other photographers knew about them, even though they were in a protected national park close to Banff. So, lots and lots of visitors and tourists. So I was very, very careful that other photographers didn't find out about them. But I also aware that they didn't spend all of their time within the national park. So
Right.
much like some of the Yellowstone wolves, I knew that they were going outside to areas where they could be shot or trapped. So I went to extreme lengths to make sure that they didn't get habituated to me. So this involved all sorts of different steps, but Jen alluded to one of them where, you know, if I was parking and hiking into a rendezvous site or to the den site, I would utilize 4 different vehicles. So I had my vehicle, my wife's vehicle, and then my wife's cousin's 2 vehicles. And I would alternate vehicles and I would park at different places and I would never park close. So to give you an idea, for the den site, the closest I would ever park would be 6 kilometers, so 4 miles away.
Goodness, John.
So that nobody would have a clue what the heck I was doing. And then I would hike in and I would never use established trails. I would never use the wolf trails because I didn't want to run into a wolf and let them know there was a human wandering around in there. Now, having said all that, there's no doubt over the 5 years that the wolves became aware that there was a person, you know, I guess infiltrating would, for lack of a better word. But wolves are smart animals. You know, they're as smart as our family dogs, probably smarter. You know, they're only 2% genetically separated from our family dogs. And there is no doubt that they can differentiate between my smell and any other human smell or a dog or any other thing. They're so good with their smell that they can be walking along, come and smell my footprint and know, okay, John Marriott, this person that has been around for 5 years, walked through here 27 minutes ago and he's going this direction. Like that's how good their sense of smell is, and what, you know, that's their primary. So I had to be extremely careful and just go to extreme lengths to make sure that my scent was never drifting in to their den site, to their rendezvous sites, into where the pups were, so that they always felt safe and secure. And they would encounter my smell in the perimeter, and then I was very careful to ensure there was never any food smells associated with that, things like that. I was always wearing full camo head to toe. I often would scent myself in the, you know, anyone that's a deer hunter knows you can buy the scent that hides a little bit of it. Although for wolves, you know, it's marginal what it actually helps with, because wolves are so good at scenting things. But there were just so many different things with the den site. There were rules within Parks Canada. You can't be within 200 meters, so within 200 yards of a den site. So you know, think, well, how the heck do you get pictures from 200 yards away? You know, if you think of, if you're a golfer and you think, geez, 200 yards, that's pretty far. That's like a 5-iron or a 4-iron away, or for some people, it's a driver away. You know, it's a long shot. And so I from Canon Canada was able to borrow 1200 millimeter lens. I borrowed an 800 millimeter for a while. I borrowed crop cameras. It was basically always shooting at anywhere between 1200 millimeters and 2000 millimeters.
And teleconverters. And
then further cropping, and then having to use the software to enhance enough to be able to get images that were good enough for the book. But I knew all that going in. I knew that, you know, there were going to be challenges, and I was shooting across a pond, so there were, you know, insects flying in the air.
And you said you would even sometimes add to the park rules the distance.
Absolutely. I never went within really 230 yards was where my main vantage point was, away from the, I was just the one where I felt the safest, where I felt there weren't going to be any wolves coming to where I was. There was no chance of them catching my scent. So I spent a tremendous amount of time at the den site and at the rendezvous sites when there weren't wolves there. So in the off seasons, figuring out what's the prevailing wind, what are the paths they use, what paths don't they use, how can I approach this? So it was, you know, a lot of that project was spending time where I wasn't even looking for wolves, or I was busy figuring out, okay, when I go back in May, how can I observe this safely, still get some shots, but follow all the rules and make sure that they don't figure out that I'm there. And then occasionally I had, you know, like Jen alluded to there, I had, you know, a wolf pup found me one day. and just came
Yeah.
walking towards me in one of the
Yeah.
rendezvous sites. And you know, I'm like, oh great, what do I do? Like, I don't want it to come right up to me. And it was literally walking right up to
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. Because it's your
You know, and
glass
it figured
eyeball.
out there was something there and was super curious.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm talking to it, and every time I would say something, it would just freeze, and then it would
I
keep
can
coming
just
closer.
picture that.
You know, so it
So
got to
cute.
within like 10 yards of me, and finally I took off my head mask, and so they could see my face and see me moving, and I moved, bobbed my head back and forth. I said, "Get out of here, little buddy, you've got to
Yeah,
leave,"
yeah.
and it ran away.
That made me laugh out loud. I could just picture that. It was so cute. It was so cute. I had to read
And
that
then I
part to my
had,
husband. It was
you know,
so
I always had to be aware of, you know, I'm sneaking into these wolf sites
right, right.
silently, and I had to be, you know, just it was a thrilling but also harrowing thing, knowing that you're going through grizzly bear country, cougar
Right.
country,
Cougar.
wolf country, you know, trying to keep myself safe. I always had, you know, a satellite device, a bear spray, a big knife. I
Mm-hmm.
was always on the ready, and just my senses during those 5 years were so alert.
I bet.
You know, I could, I mean, I remember several times, like, I got so good at sneaking into these sites and stuff. There were times where I would sneak in and be like, oh shit, there's a wolf, an adult wolf laying sleeping 5 yards
Oh,
away
yes,
from me.
yes. I remember
I gotta
that.
back out
Yes.
of here now. You know, like that's how good I got at you know, and then having the boss, the
Yes,
biggest
that was
bear in Banff National
crazy.
Park, come walk by me within just touching distance of me one day while I was sitting at a rendezvous site. And that was quite a terrifying experience,
Yeah. That
because
sounded
then I
like the
got
most
worried that
terrifying.
then when the
Yeah.
wolves confronted him, I got worried they were going to drive him right back onto me.
Right,
So I had to
right.
get out of there.
Yeah.
And that was actually the last time I went in. So I had a, you know, you have to set yourself some ethical boundaries when you're doing projects
Mm-hmm.
like that. And I had said, if I ever get discovered in one of these sites, I can't go back into that site again.
Yeah.
And so on that one, when I left that, the wolves saw me, the adult wolves saw me when I got out of there. And so I never went back into that rendezvous site ever. I still have never been back in there
Oh wow.
in
See,
15 years
that's what it
since.
was, John, about that book. It was just like, I mean, you set rules and you meant them. And like the
Yeah.
ethics were not
Yeah.
crossed ever.
Well, I mean, you know, to give you another great example,
Yeah.
so I discovered the den site in 2015,
Mm-hmm.
did all my research in 2015. 2016 was the year I photographed at it.
Yes,
Never been
yes.
back since.
Wow. And you know it's probably there.
Oh, I know it's there
So
still. I know
tempting.
there's probably pups there right now.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah.
And those were cute pups. Those were great
Oh,
shots.
yeah.
Those were
Yeah. I mean,
so
even
cute.
shooting from that great distance, you can see in the book that I was still able to get some pretty cool photos.
Yes,
And
yes.
yeah.
And I love the moment when mom, I think you move your hand to scratch something and
Yeah.
and you didn't realize that the wind had changed. And she
Yeah.
looks right at you from that distance, from that far.
Yeah.
She saw
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
It's
a couple of the
crazy.
times that the wind shifted was when
Yeah.
it was later on in the project, you know, year 4, year 5, where I really started realizing they know I'm here. Like
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
they know, like there were times when the wind would shift and I'd see all the adults suddenly get up and stare into my direction. And I'd be like, oh, shoot, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they would all settle back down again. And it was as if, you know, if I, you know, it's tough to anthropomorphize,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
I always have trouble saying that word,
I do too. I do
but
too.
to put, you know, it was as if, you know, my thoughts are that I think they were sensing, oh, there's that smell again. Oh,
Right.
it's just that one human that we know is safe.
Yeah.
We've smelt
This is
him
our fourth or
before. He's been
fifth
around
human.
for
Yeah.
years. We know this one's okay.
This crazy human that keeps
And
coming with that glass eyeball.
yeah, exactly. So
He just like looks at us. Doesn't
yeah, and
offer
it was, you know,
food.
it was also really, it was really hard. Like you'll see at the end, you know, anyone that picks up that book and reads to the end,
Mm-hmm.
it was really hard to give up that project in the end, you know,
Yeah.
that was at that point had been 11 straight years I had been working on wolf projects.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I haven't done any wolf stuff since, other than, you know, here and there when I run into a coastal wolf or things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's like giving up an addiction.
Yeah.
was super hard to, so now my current addiction is cougars, mountain lions,
Right, right, right. Which, you
which,
know, we're thankful for because
has
you're
certainly
fighting
been
for
an
them.
emotional roller coaster too.
Yes, yes, I know. I was going to talk about those. I did want to say at the end of that book, though, I felt like, oh my gosh, he's giving up like part of his family. Like I was like almost like teared up a little bit at the end because it was like saying goodbye to them had to be hard after that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
And,
do love
there
that.
were,
Go ahead, go ahead, John.
there were, it's such a weird thing to have known these animals
Hmm.
for 5 or 6 years, and, to have named many of them just in my own names,
Right,
and,
right, right.
to then I then waited 4 years before publishing the book
Yes,
because I wanted to give some leeway. I didn't want people just rushing out and going, "Oh, there's wolves down there. Let's go find them."
yes, absolutely. That was another
So
thing
I
that,
left some leeway then to do some changeover and change in behavior. I was pretty confident that those wolves don't use the roads much or anything. So it's pretty confident that nobody's going to be able to go in there and just figure it out
yeah, yeah,
instantly. And,
yeah.
if someone goes and puts in the time, they might be able to. But
I was going to say, and the
yeah, it was
time.
at
I don't
the
know.
end to kind of like, I don't know whatever happened to that. I don't know what happened in the end. To be able to have that, just that nebulous ending of, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the cool thing, is I don't know what
Yeah, you
happens
don't know, and
in
then
the end.
they're free and they're wild. Yeah, and I
Yeah, they're
think
free and they're wild, and that's kind of how I sort of look at a lot of my wildlife photographies. I
yeah,
don't always need to know everything. Like, don't need to keep being in their lives.
that's a
I
good
can,
point. That's a good
I've
point.
told the story. The important part to me was to tie that story to trapping and trophy hunting, and
Yes,
to make people emotionally tied to the wolves, and get to the end of the book and go, what the F are we doing still allowing
exactly.
trophy hunting and unlimited trapping of wolves throughout Western US and Canada?
Absolutely.
Why?
Yeah.
What, these are creatures that are literally like our family German shepherds and
Hmm.
Great Danes and Cocker Spaniels and so on. Even though Cocker Spaniels don't look like a wolf,
Right,
they're
right.
super genetically tied to them.
And then there's no need for the meat either. It's not, it's a hobby.
No, we're not
It's a
eating them.
hobby.
We're not, you might sell a fur for $300, but that's not even going to pay, your
Right,
snowmobile maintenance for the year, or your truck maintenance, or your tanks of gas, or like, it's just killing for the sake of killing.
right, right.
And
And you
so,
said that like a buffer zone would be good around the parks.
absolutely, yeah, buffer
Yeah,
zones, and even just change it. Like, we don't need to be using killing neck snares anymore. Those
yeah,
metal wires that
right.
are used throughout much of the US and Canada, that are so indiscriminate, kill so many things. And just go in and imagine constantly being a family of wolves, and every winter transfer it over to humans and go, okay, so you got a family, you got 5 children,
Yeah,
and just every winter a couple of kids get hit by a bus or something,
right,
something completely out of your control. How
right.
do you deal with that emotionally and socially, and the stability, and like,
Yeah.
it just makes no sense whatsoever. It's
Like
completely illogical.
aunts are gone, uncles are gone, cousins are gone,
Totally,
kids are
totally.
gone. Like the
Yeah,
whole family structure just
yeah.
gets wiped,
Just
changes every winter because of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a large part of what I've kind of dedicated my career to at this point. I'm
Yes.
fortunate enough now. I've been in this long enough. I'm coming up to, it's January of 2026 will be my 30th anniversary of my first ever sale.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm coming up to 30 years as a wildlife photographer, which is just crazy. And I'm fortunate enough that I got the business side figured out. I actually can, I don't work very hard at that anymore. Now I work hard
Yeah.
on the conservation stuff, and that's what I
Yes.
dedicate most of my career to at this point. So I'm lucky to be in that position now, and I kind of help out a lot with younger photographers, or just even other photographers that want to get more into conservation stuff, and
Yeah, yeah.
trying to help them be more impactful.
Yeah. And so that is why you started the exposed conser I can't even say it, exposed conservancy, right?
Yeah, the Exposed Wildlife
Wildlife
Conservancy. So we
Conservancy. Yeah.
co-founded that in 2018. We
Hmm.
became a registered charity in Canada in
Hmm.
2023. Um, unfortunately, we're not registered in the US, but Canadians can get a tax receipt.
Hmm.
But we advocate. Basically, we exist solely to advocate for big apex predators.
Yes, yes.
So we're the only organization in Canada that advocates for mountain lions, wolves, and grizzly bears and wolverine.
Yeah,
And then we, some of our messaging and stuff even makes filters down into the States. We have some of our trapping documentaries. We've had some of the Yellowstone experts getting interviewed in them. Really a lot of it applies just beyond Canada.
absolutely.
Things
Yes.
like snares, like trapping practices,
Yes.
and like trophy hunting that really, is something that as a whole we need to try and maintain some hope. There's some pretty terrible things going on right now in the US and Canada in regards to wildlife management.
Yes.
Delisting wolves and bears and
Mm-hmm.
upping hunts and not using science. And so it can get quite disheartening. And I am lucky that I'm pretty strong mentally. And so I try to be kind of at the forefront, taking the brunt of this stuff and being the one calling out the politicians, the biologists, the hunters, the trappers. And I'm okay with being at the forefront and taking the brunt of that criticism, and I kind of want to be, the spearhead and having people get inspired to get involved. And just, I've always said, we're just going to slowly build an army of educated people
Yes.
that fights back and that doesn't believe all these myths and, all this stuff that the hunters and trappers are trying to bring up from, 100 years ago, that,
Right. Right.
wolves are out there killing every last deer. And I mean, just,
I think a
yes,
lot of what you say echoes the stuff going on in the States. And I told you I'm from
absolutely
the
does. Yes.
Midwest. Yes, but I'm in the
Yeah.
West a lot. And it just is, the fights that are always going on out there are not new to me because I've been going out there for many years now. But in the Midwest, we don't fight about those things, but it's just constant fight with science and the hunters. And it's
Yeah.
like, why is this so hard? Like, to me, like, I don't think it's that hard. The way that we treat our animals says a lot about who we are as a country, who we are as, a continent. So I sometimes, whenever you're fighting for a cause, I'm like, yes, John's out there. He's like, let's all get behind him because we need that. We do need that. We need voices that will stand up for it. Um, and I know many people that are watching now and that will watch this later are just local or hobbyist wildlife photographers. So, like you said, hope. I was just listening to Jane Goodall, and she said, if we lose hope, we're doomed, because if we lose hope, we become apathetic and do nothing. So, what do we do, John, as local hobbyists, and even some of us are making a little money from it, but we don't have the voice you have. But what part do we play in this hope? What hope do we have?
So, first of all, I want to say that it's critical to maintain hope. That can be tough to do in, political, environmental climate right now. But I always sort of look at California as a kind of a beacon of hope, because California, 30 years ago, banned mountain lion hunting. California is, they got rid of their wolves a long time ago, killed off the last grizzly in 1924. California is near and dear to my heart because I went to school down there. I went to Berkeley.
That's right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, I would be up backpacking and fishing in the northern Sierras. And I remember thinking, like, this is so weird. Like, there's no predators. There's like just black bears and coyotes. It's pretty wild. And it's like, why are there not? And California is slowly making that, they banned cougar hunting. Wolves have recolonized. They're looking very, very strongly at bringing back grizzly bears. I think it's probably going to happen in the next decade. They've banned commercial trapping now. There's all this stuff, and they're the only wildlife board in all the different jurisdictions throughout North America, including Mexico, including Canada, where the wildlife board has more non-consumptive users. So that means hikers, bikers, wildlife photographers, than they have consumptive users. That's the hunters and trappers.
Yeah.
So it's the only jurisdiction in North America that has finally seen that shift. And so it gives hope. And then I see things like British Columbia. I was part of this big, big campaign in British Columbia the last 20 years. And then finally in 2017, we saw the grizzly bear hunt get banned in British Columbia. despite it being a big economic driver. There were lots of people coming and paying big money to go kill a grizzly there. And instead, it has shifted now to ecotourism, where people are paying big money now to come on a photo tour with me, or another photographer.
Yeah.
And then that bear's still alive. And the next week, another group comes and pays big
more money.
Right. And it actually ends up being way more money and way more jobs.
Yes.
And so it's that shift. And you see little pockets of it here and there. You see Yellowstone, that wolf viewing economy. It's struggling now with what's going on around the periphery of Yellowstone. That's why buffer zone would be so critical to implement. So Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, one of the big campaigns we're going to be launching this year is the buffer zone concept. And it'll be applicable anywhere, anywhere around national parks or protected areas. But I also see places like Patagonia, where one single ranch has turned into a $20 million a year puma, mountain lion, cougar viewing business. And going, okay, how do we now apply that? How do we take those lessons, start talking to politicians elsewhere throughout North America, around the world, and go, you're missing out. There's actually, this northern community in Alberta or British Columbia or Montana, that, little tiny community that they're all concerned about, oh, don't affect our chopping or our trophy hunting, because they're making $300 off of a wolf pelt.
Right.
Well, how about turning to wolf viewing? What if you could make $15 million a year as a community, and have a couple of lodges and turn all these trappers into guides? And like, you're just totally missing the boat here. And so
I think that's the way to talk about it to those people, is the money. Like,
absolutely, because unfortunately, we already know, talking about the biology and the ecology and the ecosystem benefits of having these predators really isn't working. There's this inborn hate, inbred hate, for lack of a better word. I think people know what I'm talking about there. But we need to just sort of slowly shift. And economics is one way. It's not ideal. I mean, I don't want to have to be out there turning every single animal into a dollar figure, but it is one way where we can reach politicians. And so it's shifting perspective. I think this gives us some hope as a community. I think as hobbyists and amateur photographers, and even making a little bit of money, there are lots of different ways. One, just reading stuff that environmental organizations are putting out. Literally just reading it, slowly educating yourself, reading books like my books, reading books about the Yellowstone wolves. Carter Niemeyer just put out a new book, going and reading that. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is just supporting groups that you believe in. So it doesn't have to be Exposed. It could be any of the groups. There's great groups in the US all over the place, great groups all over Canada. Find a couple that you really like. And it doesn't take much, like literally $25 a month can be a huge difference maker. Because if you get a whole bunch of people doing that, it just creates a whole momentum and allows them to hire more people, allows them to increase their social media reach, which then gets more people. It's just a whole snowball effect of growing this community, this army of people that's going to fight back now.
Yeah, that is so good. And I want to tell people, like, the trapping series that you did with Exposed. It's a 3-part series, and it is really good. It's really good. I started watching that while I was working out one day, like on my iPad. I'm on the treadmill and I'm like, I'm not sure this is workout. But it's like, it really tugs at your heart, but also your head. You're like, this doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. And you start to open your eyes. Well, how is it happening in my state? How is it happening in my neighboring state? Or what? I didn't even know people were doing this anymore, and just.
And that's the thing, it's this, the whole documentary and this whole campaign that we've launched is called Trapped in the Past. And it's this notion that Canada and the US, were, the Boone and Crockett and all these, you have all these legends from the past, and they were all just out there killing everything. And that the fur trade, helped establish the West.
Sorry, my dogs.
That's okay. For both Canada
my golden
and the
retrievers.
US, and it's this trapped in the past notion that we don't really need to be like, who's wearing fur nowadays? Like, we have so many synthetic materials now that are better for, you don't see guys going up Everest, guys and gals going up Everest wearing fur coats, and they're way better alternatives now. And there are environmental, there are disadvantages and advantages, but really there's there's no environmental advantage to going out and killing a whole bunch of things to wear fur. Like, A, we don't have enough animals in the world to clothe everybody anymore. We got 9 billion humans walking around on the planet. So we just don't need the fur trade period anymore. Like, there's just no reason for fur
Right.
trapping anymore.
Right. It was so
So it goes
glamorized growing
into,
up in history, like the fur traders on the
yeah,
Mississippi. And it's like we're now in 2025.
yeah, like it's,
We can
that
change.
now really it's a hobby, but
Yeah, right.
it's, for people, if you were to take a look, it's pervasive. If you look, whether you're in North Carolina or whether you're in Washington State or whether you're in Alberta, there are thousands of trap lines in all these places, and people are doing it behind the scenes, and you don't even know about it. And you start digging in your own state or your own province, and I guarantee you will be shocked at how much trapping is still going on and how little money it generates.
Yeah, right. And how little regulation there is.
And how little regulation. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you have a question for John, go ahead and put that in the Q&A. And John, I wanted you to do you have an update on the cougar and the kittens? Do you have an update for that? I can try.
Yeah, so in the cougar kittens right now are in the Greater Vancouver Zoo.
Okay, I don't have a picture of them, the original kittens, but I do have a cougar picture of you.
Yeah, so that was a cougar encounter I had with a kitten similar age to the ones that in February. I unfortunately, the cougar that I've been tracking for 4 winters was shot and killed by trophy hunters, orphaning 2 young kittens. So it's still being under investigation by Fish and Wildlife in Alberta. It's been a big political media firestorm.
Yes.
The kittens have now, they're in Greater Vancouver Zoo right now, but they're going to be headed to a permanent home within Canada sometime in the next few months here. We should hear news of that. But yeah, it's just been a horribly unfortunate situation, and has caused up a lot of fury really over how cougar hunting is done in Canada and the US.
Yeah.
Using GPS collared hounds to chase cougars, basically terrify them, get them to go up into a tree, and then go up and shoot them out of the tree. So there's not a lot of fair and ethical, fair chase and ethical hunting. It's pretty much as vile as it gets in terms of hunting. And that it's not just the big males that go out and they kill females, just like this example showed. There's a lot of hunting just to kill things, just to kill predators, so they can have more deer and elk to go out and hunt.
I mean, like you were saying earlier about the trapping, like I didn't know people had fun running things over with snowmobiles. I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I had no idea that was happening. So it's like, you just have the things that you don't know. It's like, seriously, why would you want, what in your heart makes you want to do that? That's what comes to me, is like, what part of your person makes you want to do that to a living thing? That's really hard for me to understand. But we do have some questions, John. So let me ask that. Let's see if we can get those. Janine says, "Hi, John. What advice do you have for young wildlife photographers? And how do we incentivize the government to promote sustainable ecotourism?" That's 2 good questions.
Yeah. So for young photographers, is this, Janine, maybe clarify, are you talking about just, advice from a photography perspective, or from you want to become a professional perspective? So clarify that one.
Janine.
And then in the meantime, and the second question was, I'm sorry, repeat that.
She said, how do we incentivize the government to promote sustainable ecotourism?
Yeah, so incentivizing as we all know, it's one thing to show the economics of wildlife viewing, but then, you flip the card and you can love things to death very, very quickly. We see that right here in my hometown, bordering Banff National Park, where we're up to 5 million visitors a year, and we have real trouble keeping stable wolf and grizzly bear populations because there's just too many people, and the protected area isn't big enough. So that's a really key question that I don't know if we really have clear answers to, other than I think we need more protected areas. I think we need more Indigenous input, particularly here in Canada, but also in the US. I just finished reading a book about, how the US colonized their Indigenous groups, and it was pretty shocking. Similar to Canada, you guys took away even more rights than we did in Canada. and broke even more treaties. And so to get Indigenous people connected back to nature again and fighting on our side, I guess I would say, as opposed to on the just kill everything side, would be one way to. But yeah, it's always a tough. Not really totally sure yet how we kind of limit that ecotourism to make sure it's sustainable. Patagonia is a good place to look to for that. Some of the Great Bear Rainforest where I go, there's some areas with like the Kootenay where I go there's a plan laid out 30 years ago. So there's only 2 operators get to go right into the estuary in 2 little Zodiacs for 6 hours a day. And the other 18 hours a day, nobody's in there. There's no humans. Humans are not allowed to set foot in there. There's no trapping. There's no logging. There's no mining. It's just grizzly bears are the #1 priority. So maybe setting aside more areas like that throughout the US and Canada where wildlife becomes the priority. Now, of course, convincing politicians of that.
I was going to say, oh man. Well, Janine says recreational wildlife photography. Do you have advice for a young?
Yeah, so I would say, keep following your passion. Don't get too caught up in what everybody else is doing. Like if you want to go off and photograph badgers on the prairies, go photograph badgers on the prairies. Go find interesting things that inspire you and maybe get away from the crowds a little bit. It's really easy to go get caught up and go into Yellowstone or go into Jasper and, joining the throngs. I'm one of those photographers that doesn't really do that anymore. I used to 15 years ago, but now I go find my own little spots out and it's a little bit harder, but I find it much more satisfying to go out and find my own little coyote den and where there's no other photographers and just setting up and watching things and taking a few photos. And
we talk a lot about this on the podcast because many of us go to the Tetons a lot and are invested in those bears that have names and numbers that we all know. But it's an ethical dilemma every time. Do I sit in this bear jam? I don't know if I want to sit here. Like maybe I'm just going to go do pelicans somewhere, like I just
maybe just do a mix, and I would also say, I think it's, if you can afford it, it's fulfilling to go to different places sometimes, whether that's on a photo tour, which of course, gets into a different stratosphere for price, or just, going outside your comfort zone and, renting a van and traveling around somewhere you haven't been and just seeing what unfolds. Go to the Badlands or go to the Yukon or go to Alaska or something like that.
And I think when we showcase these places, it does make people, curious. And when they're curious about it, they learn more and then they care more. So I think
absolutely.
Even hobbyists with Instagram now, you do make a difference. And like
I would also say, Janine, don't worry too much about the social media aspect of it. Like I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I hate Instagram and Facebook and stuff. I do them because I have to. But if you go follow me on there, I basically do the bare minimum on there. Like I post a few pretty pictures, and a lot of it's conservation stuff.
You're not the first
person
to say that.
The algorithms don't necessarily like what I do, and I don't really care.
I think everyone's just tired of it. And it's what we keep saying on this is like, just be there for the community. And,
absolutely,
and just for what you care about, and stop worrying about the numbers, because you can't beat it. You can't beat the algorithm. And is it worth it anyway? I don't know. I don't think so.
Just do what's interesting to you. If you put a pretty picture on there, just don't care if 50 people like it or 500 people like it or 5 people like it. Just, you put a pretty picture on there. That's great.
And then Adrian says, hey, John, is there any way to see your back in the day work on film?
Actually, the Tall Tales Long Lenses book. So the first 3 chapters are all slide photographs.
Okay.
And then part of chapter 4, I believe, is also, so those are all, none of those are digital. They've all been digitized from slides. But that's some of my old work. And
you can get that on your website and on where books are sold.
And Amazon, I think, still has a few copies.
And then someone asks, John, do you sell your merchandise to help fund your conservation programs? Tell people how they can support EXPOSED.
Yeah, so Exposed, I am the chair, the president of Exposed, and also
Mhm.
the co-founder. We have two employees, two part-time employees. One is moving to full-time in August. I have been working with Exposed now since we started in 2015 as a um, kind of as a video YouTube series. 2018 went
Mhm.
to a
Mhm.
nonprofit. 2024 became a charity. To date, I have not taken a single cent from it. So everything I do, I put my money and time back into conservation. Um, my own projects, yeah, I'm a donor to Exposed. I'm a monthly donor. I'm actually a one-time donor, like a major gift donor,
Yep.
but I'm becoming a monthly donor next month. We're going to do a little social media campaign on it. John's doing it. Come
Even
join
John's
him.
doing it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, be a monthly donor, and help support our staff and our projects and so
Yeah.
on. Um, and then we have a store. Exposed has its own store and gear, so you can see we have camo hats and cool hoodies with these are from my photographs, just silhouettes from my photographs. And then we've actually got like this Grizzly hoodie has it's fur from a photograph
Oh,
of
that's
mine, so it's
cool.
Grizzly fur that makes up the whole Exposed thing on
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
So
that's
it's
cool.
hoodies and t-shirts, and it's really good clothing, and it all goes back to supporting our work. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's camo hats and toques, and or you guys call them beanies. We call them
I had
toques
to
up
look
here in
that up. I had
Canada.
to look that word up the other day because a
Yeah.
Canadian said that, bring your toque. And I'm like, what does that mean? I have no idea.
Yeah. uh,
Well, that's
yeah.
great. People
So
can find that. And is
yeah.
it
Yeah.
exposed.com or?
It's the easiest way is it's
Yeah.
exposedwc.org.
Okay. Yeah. .org. Yeah. That's,
Exposed Wildlife Conservancy.org also works.
yeah, that's
Oh,
good.
Janine, I see Janine just posted it in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Janine. Thank you so much. Everyone can see that in the chat if you'd like. Thanks so much for doing that. So I love in Tall Tales how you say that old rogue grizzly bear kind of set a passion for you. Like it was this
Yeah.
big thing you wanted to find for many, many years after that. And now
Yeah.
you've
So
found so many
yeah.
grizzly bears you found and so many beautiful wolves. But what is that sort of old rogue grizzly bear thing for you now? What do you
So
want?
it's still so when I saw Reacher this year in the
Yeah,
Kootenay, so
yeah,
he is the single biggest grizzly bear I have ever seen in my life, I
yeah,
believe.
yeah,
And it was I've been in this 30 years, like I said, and it took my breath away.
yeah, yeah.
Wasn't just breathtaking, it actually, like, my heart was pounding. I was like, oh, please let me get a photograph. Like, we were sneaking in the Zodiac and I could see through binoculars. I'm like, oh my God, look at this thing.
It's
It's like a
crazy.
buffalo sitting there in the and so we kind of came around a corner in the estuary, this little bit of a river, and he stood up, and that's when I got that photograph. It was literally 1 second, and then
Mm-hmm,
he
mm-hmm.
down on all fours and charging away like a buffalo, like I said.
Wow. Wow.
But to go back to that story, so when I was 11, so the same creek that I went fishing on when I was 5 with my dad, we went
Yeah.
every single summer.
Yeah.
And when I was 11, I was there with my 6-year-old brother and my dad, and we checked out a new part of the creek I had never been to before, further up the logging road, way off in the wilderness. And we stopped at this little bridge, and I was run down to check for tracks, and went down in this mud. There's a little mud spot, and I checked for tracks, and there's not much there. Come back up to the truck. Well, we were scouting that for a place to camp. So 3 days later, we came back and we camped in that spot. So we pull the trailer in, set up the tent trailer, and while my dad's setting up the tent trailer, I run back to this mud spot again. So it's 3 days later, and I get down there, and there's this enormous human-looking track sitting there, and I'm just
Yeah.
staring at it. And I'm like, and at the time, as an 11-year-old, so 1978, the movie Sasquatch had come out. And
So your brain is moving.
I went and saw it like 7 times, and I'd read every Sasquatch book there was. And I just screamed out at my dad, Dad, Sasquatch track! I was so excited. And we went back home after that little camping trip, and the neighbor was a big hunter and kind of an outdoorsman. quite an ethical guy though.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember me and my dad going over to tell him about this Sasquatch, and I was so excited. And in one simple sentence, he just changed my whole focus of life. And he went, "Oh, that, probably not no such thing as Sasquatch. It was probably a big old rogue grizzly bear. I think those might be starting to come back here again." And it just, something flipped in my brain. I was,
Yep.
big old grizzly bear. What do you?
You're like,
What's
that's
that? What do
possible?
you mean by there's grizzly bears around here?
Yeah, yeah.
Just from then on, I've been obsessed with big old male rogue grizzly bears. Far
That
more
is
than you
so
can throw like
cool.
the cutest little cubs in front of me, and I'm like, no, I'm going for the big old rogue
That's
scars and
awesome.
half torn ear, and
It's
yeah,
awesome. I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast a lot, how there are things in your life that you don't know are creating layers for what you're going to become later. And that just
absolutely.
reminds me of that. Like I've been going to national parks like my whole life, grew up in the Shawnee National Forest, really didn't think I'm going to have a camera and be totally obsessed with animals like a nut, I never thought that until I got my first DSLR in 2017 to come to Banff. I was finally like, I am going to spend money on myself. We're going to Banff. I have 5 kids. I'm like, I've put everything for them, and now it's something for me. And like, I think it like woke something up, and I think it does that with people. But there are things that are
Yeah,
there in the past forever. I was going to
yeah.
tell you my first male grizzly was, which I didn't even know, it was probably not, it was unethical or wrong, but it was, I think, either split lip or boss on the train tracks in Banff.
Yeah.
And I was literally shaking. I had like a 7300 or something. And when we were
Yeah.
with a group of people, they were like, this lady's crazy. Why does she care? Why does she care so much? And I'm just like, you don't see this? But now I know, but then I quickly learned, within the year or two that like, yeah, that's not where we want to see grizzly bears. So,
Right, right.
which you've had some tragedies in Banff recently too with that.
We
So
have, yes, yes.
yeah, so just look at John's Instagram and you can always be kept up to date with things that are going on in Canada and the animals that need us, and you're always speaking out for them. And do you have things that are coming up in the next 2 years that you would like to tell people about, or year?
Well, I'm hoping to get a cougar book out, so a mountain lion book
Ooh,
out. I'm waiting to see what unfolds with this situation
yes,
with the cougar kittens, and
yes.
to sort of, I had always hoped that so I've been working on a cougar project for the last 5 years now, or
Mm-hmm,
4.5 years. And
mm-hmm.
my plan was to sort of put 5 years in, and it's a pretty, like, some years I don't even see a cougar.
Right, right.
So
And it was the same with the wolves too. You went
oh
months and
yeah,
months
totally.
without seeing them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you got to know going into some of these projects that, like, I'm okay with that. I love the challenge.
Mm,
I've kind of, I don't really even do roadside wildlife anymore.
mm-hmm,
I'm
mm-hmm.
now sort of, occasionally I do, but I'm more all about the, if I have to track a cougar 10 miles through the snow, that's what I'm that's what I'm
Yeah,
into.
yeah,
Even if it means most of the time I never see it.
yeah.
So I would like to get a book out about that, kind of sort of be probably my final book project. I've got 8 books out already, so this would be the ninth. Maybe
That's
maybe at
awesome.
some point do a culmination of my career, 10th one, to
We
just
need
to
a big
round out.
coffee table book. John Marriott,
Yeah, yeah,
big coffee
exactly.
table
Yeah,
of all your work, 30
yeah,
year, your 30-year work. Yeah.
yeah,
If you want to
yeah.
admit that.
I know. Yeah. Do I want to admit that? Oof. Getting
But
up
people,
there.
but
I'm
people
like the
can
old
do.
man of photography now.
Hey, no, no. I'm just getting started and we're about the same age. So I like when people say young photographers, I'm like, well, I'm not a young photographer, but I'm a young photographer,
Yeah,
I
right.
still
Yeah,
consider I'm
yeah,
still learning. So,
yeah.
but so do you have tours that people can go on and prints that people can buy,
Yeah,
things like that?
I've scaled my tours back quite a
Mm-hmm.
bit, but I do
Yeah.
still have, like, I saw, I don't know if he's still on, but at least one of the participants, hey
Oh,
Dale,
good. Oh, good.
has been on a trip with me doing grizzly bears before. So I have eight
Mm-hmm.
trips a year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 3 of them are unadvertised, so they're
Yes.
really only open to sort of like my long-term clients
Yes. Yes. That
that have
makes sense.
been on like 5 or more trips with me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then 5 of them are open to, so I have a couple Jasper tours each year. I actually just had a spot open up a week ago, so
Mm-hmm.
which I haven't advertised yet. So if anybody wants to join a Jasper photo tour in November. We'll be looking for big bull moose, bull elk, bighorn rams, grizzlies in the snow, maybe a wolf if we're lucky.
Yeah, you never know.
Caribou, which is a super rare mountain caribou.
Yeah, I've never seen a caribou. When you mentioned that in your book, I'm like, oh, I could go back to Jasper and maybe see that.
Yeah, and then I've got 3 Kootenay trips next year in 2026. So varying lengths: a 5-day, a 6-day, and a 3-day.
Yeah.
So they're all, I mean, nothing's cheap, but people, people kind of know if they're into photo tours or not.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah. So that's and then basically photo trips with me, they usually don't get, I would say I'm different from many photo trips because I'm pretty hardcore, dawn to dusk. You're out there constantly.
Yeah.
But I like to have fun on my photo trips. So, you have a glass of wine with dinner, you chat about all the stories and stuff. I don't usually get into all the technical stuff too much. Like I'm not a big Lightroom guy. I mean, I use all that stuff. But there are other photographers that are better. If that's the style of photo trip you like to go on, they're better trips than mine. Mine is more for people that love socializing and just love a great opportunity and like to hear lots of good stories. And
I like that. Yeah. I'm guiding John for the first time in the fall.
Oh, cool.
Do you have any advice for me? I'm scared.
No,
people are listening, but I'm not scared, but
Yeah. What trip are you doing?
I'm doing the Grand Tetons, just a couple days in the fall. Cool. We're going to do the elk rut and things like that. And my mentor will be with me, but he's making me lead.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I think it's, it'll come pretty naturally to you, I think, because you all share that same passion. Like I've always found it so easy to have new people join my photo tours. And like a lot of my photo tours now, because I've been doing it a long time, are just sort of the same clients over and over again, the same friends over and over again. So it's like a gathering of friends, which is pretty cool. It's pretty lucky to be in that position. But even when we have somebody new come in and join, Dale, like I just mentioned, was, came in and joined anew a few years ago. And I think Dale could attest that, you just fit seamlessly right in, and, it's just part of the gang.
Yeah. I think it's the passion and just and it's always about the people, so that's my focus. It's just, I love it so much. And that hopefully that just shines through. And
I like to set expectations, so people aren't too, they don't think it's just going to be an endless wildlife safari. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's the total opposite.
So. I know. Yeah. Well, John, I just appreciate you so much. It's been an honor, and I'm so thankful for your work, for your voice in this community. And I mean, it's around the world at this point. So thank you for being a voice for all of us when all of us are supporting you and hoping that some of these changes can come about if we just keep it up. So I really, truly appreciate you being on. And everyone, please support John. Go follow him on Instagram, John Marriott, and go to his website, buy a print, look at the tours, support Exposed, and just there's all kinds of ways you can support him. And also, if you'd like to follow the podcast, you can find the podcast at Wildlife Conversations Podcast on Instagram, and on YouTube, it's actually under my name, under Jen Ritchie Photography, and you can find us on Apple and Spotify. And I'm taking July off for the podcast. I've got a couple trips coming up that I haven't really talked about, but a couple trips coming up in July that I'm excited about. And we'll be back August 20th with Susie Esterhaus. And then there's going to be an anniversary episode on August 27th. And I think people are turning the camera on me, or like the microphone on me, or whatever, the questions on me. I think they're going to ask me questions. So that'll be fun. But I also want to thank Robert's Camera again for helping support this podcast. And you can find them at robertscamera.com. But John, mostly, again, I just want to thank you. It's been a really fun, hour, a little over an hour. So thank you so much for your time and for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It was a real pleasure.
It was. I hope to see you out someday in the field.
I know. Yeah.
I'm going to go to Kootenay with you. Okay.
Thanks, Jen. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. It's been fun. Thanks for all your chats over there. Thanks so much, John. Have a good day.
Okay, see ya.
Okay. Bye-bye.